VLR.
Welcome to the Saturday Night Cigar Lounge.
It is a very nice Saturday night here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which means it is the return of Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. Took a couple of weeks off. One of them was by accident. Well, actually, both were by accident. I ended up being out with Nathan Edmondson, the comic book writer. We were discussing a lot of stuff that was going on. It was very fun. It was funny. We didn't really talk comics at all. We talked movies most of the time. Sat around. He was in town for a signing at my favorite comic book store, Keith's Comics. So thank you very much to the guys at Keith's for putting that all together. It was a lot of fun to finally meet him, to finally see him. It was a lot of fun. I don't know what else to say outside of that, except for that, hey, I'm your host, Taylor, which I almost forgot to say. I'm your host, Taylor. And also, last week, I got E. coli. So I'd like to recommend everybody to avoid E. coli as much as they can. It's not that fun. It's not that interesting, and it's just better to not have it. So that's why I have been out the last couple of weeks. It's kind of one of those things. Is the incident, the situation, however you want to call it. But that happened. I'm back, which is always good. Y'all will hear my conversation in just a few minutes with David Brown, otherwise known as D.B. Grady. He is the co-author of Deep State inside the government secrecy industry. But before we get to that, I want to discuss something that has really been, it's something that a lot of people have talked about, and a lot of people have been discussing, which is, well, the entire occasional demonization that the right does against candidates, and the fact that the right does against candidates, and the left does against the entire thinking process. This is something that Free Radical Network's Felicia Cravens has been a big kind of pointer-outer of, for lack of a better term. She likes to say, hey, this is what goes on, this is what the left does, and the right doesn't do that. And it's not my favorite thing to do. I'm not a big fan of demonizing an entire thought process. I'm not in favor of demonizing a candidate either. I'd rather this entire thing just be about, hey, candidate A believes this, candidate B believes that, and you choose, and you vote for who you agree with the most, or who you think is the best person to hold the job. A lot of this is kind of being discussed right now when it comes to the Texas gubernatorial election between Wendy Davis, Fort Worth State Senator, who is a Democrat, and Greg Abbott, who is the Republican Attorney General here in the state of Texas. And it's been a very unique kind of fight to see, because I think a lot of people, myself included, were either extremely hopeful or, in my case, extremely worried about how Wendy Davis was going to do versus Greg Abbott. Now, it's May. There's plenty of time left. We don't know what's going to happen. But right now, Wendy Davis hasn't looked good. She has been caught up in a investigation involving the FBI. She's not the focus of it. We don't even know if the FBI is even looking into her. But they are looking into the North Texas Tollway Authority, which does business with Wendy Davis's law firm. And the FBI confirmed a few weeks ago that, oh yeah, we're looking into the NTTA, and yeah, it includes the stuff that Wendy Davis did. And so there is that. There is also the fact that she has come out with things that kind of don't make sense, positions that don't make sense. About a couple of months ago, she said, "Oh yeah, I'm for open carry," which kind of surprised everybody because guns hadn't really been an issue, and had never really been an issue in the campaign. Greg Abbott said he was for open carry a while ago, and that had kind of been it. But the reason why Wendy Davis said this, I think, was she's attempting to lure libertarians into the Davis camp. She's trying to get libertarians to vote for her. It's why she brought up medical marijuana, saying that she was in favor of that. And Greg Abbott is not in favor of that, or at least he says he's in favor of enforcing the current drug laws that are in Texas. And it's understandable. I don't agree with him on it. But Abbott said that he's against it. Davis said she was for it. Both Abbott and Davis are in agreement regarding open carry. But then that made people in the Democratic Party mad at her, including her sort of running mate, Letitia Van de Putte, the Democratic state senator from San Antonio, who isn't in favor of this either. So it was kind of weird to see that happen. There was the fight against that. And then a couple of weeks later, that same week, she said, "Oh yeah, I was for a 20-week abortion ban. I would have been perfectly in favor of that. Just not all the other stuff that was added to the abortion bill that she filibustered against." And then a couple of days later, she said, no, I was misunderstood, and then blamed the Dallas Morning News for misinterpreting her comments. But kind of getting into where I'm talking about when it comes to demonization. The left does a great job at demonizing the right. If you are... And again, this is stuff that's ridiculous, too. But they do a great job. If you want there to be cuts in Medicare, you want Social Security to be privatized, you want to throw grandma off the cliff. Regardless whether grandma has enough money to pay for her medical bills out of her own pocket, not through Medicaid or Medicare. If you are against abortion, you know what all you are? You want women to be barefoot and pregnant in their kitchen. That's all you want them to do. When in reality, it has nothing to do with that. It may be that somebody believes that life starts at conception, and that's it. And you want to protect life as much as possible. If you're for guns, well, you're obviously a redneck. You're obviously a racist, probably. You're obviously a powder keg ready to go off. If you are against state-enforced gay marriage, now this is important to bring up, state-enforced gay marriage, it's obvious that you're a homophobe and a bigot. Now, it's great that they can say all this stuff and completely demonize people, because I think a lot of voters out there would prefer just simple answers. You know, they not everyone wants to have nuanced discussions where they say, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm really not a fan of gay marriage being legalized across the country because it's not in the Constitution." But I think that if a church wants to say, okay, hey, we'll marry couples of any kind, that's the church's choice. Or if two guys, two gals, a guy and a bunch of gals, a bunch of guys and one gal all want to get together and come up with a contract between each other, that they should be able to do that. And if it turns out that they decide to break that contract, they can go to a lawyer and come up with something else, a way to a settlement of some kind. But if you give that nuanced answer, there are people who aren't going to care about that. And they prefer just yelling and screaming and saying, no, you're for this, or no, you're against that. I've already been called a rhino in the chat room by NJ Libertarian, and NJ should know me well enough to know that I may vote in Republican primaries, but I do not consider myself a Republican. I am a small L libertarian. Or if you want to be even more fun, I am a anti-federalist. Yes, I would have been one of the people probably trying to write anti-federalist letters with Patrick Henry. I probably would have been the person who Patrick Henry would probably look at the stuff and go, yeah, Taylor, that's great, but I got this all taken care of. Don't worry about it. But it's just one of the situations where the left does an excellent job at demonizing the right, whereas the right is more willing to just go after candidates. And maybe it's because the right is perfectly happy with saying, hey, we're going to fight for this candidate. Okay, it's all over. All right, we're going to go home and live our own lives, because they want the government to leave them alone. Whereas the left is all about making sure the government gets into people's lives as much as possible. So it's possible that that's why you just see a lot of people not get involved in politics after an election. When in reality, the fight between the election is probably the most important fight as it is. You have to keep your senators and representatives and mayors and councilmen, you have to keep them honest. And too many people probably care more about the election than they do about anything else. And that's a problem. And I don't know if there's a way to change that, unless it just becomes pushing ideology, which the left does so well and the right doesn't. Or if there's another way around it. Maybe there's a way to use the re-education terms. Maybe there's a way to re-educate candidates, and well, not just candidate, but people. You know, the Tea Party, you know, you can only have so many Tea Party rallies. You have to go home and you have to call, and you have to talk to people, and you have to say, hey, this has to be done. And maybe the thing that you're going to run into is you're going to have people get in a big fight over it. I know people who disagree with me on my stance on gay marriage and saying I think it ought to be a church thing or a thing between two families. I know people who disagree with me on drugs, you know, with me saying I think they ought to be that they ought to be legalized. I'm sure there are people on the right who disagree with me about Medicare and Medicaid because they want people to have that social safety net instead of sitting there and saying, okay, maybe it ought to be a state thing, meaning the individual states, if Texas wants to have one, California doesn't, or if California does, New Jersey doesn't, or South Carolina does it, or maybe have it all be privatized. Or, you know, I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't agree with that, and that's when people just get mad and start fighting with each other, and we start talking about the circular firing squad. But maybe it's time that's what we start doing things, getting out and talking to people. Maybe that's what needs to be done outside of the big massive conference, outside of the just tweeting to everybody who agrees with you. Maybe that's the solution. I don't know. I'm curious what y'all think. This is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. If you want to respond to what I think, you can do that by either tweeting me at EYE Desert Blog. That's at EYE Desert Blog. We also have a chat room at Vigilant Liberty Radio. You can go to at vigilantlibertyradio.us, www.vigilantlibertyradio.us/chat, and you'll see the link to the chat room. So feel free to hop in, join in the conversation, and we can do all of that. Outside of that, coming up in just a minute, we will have my conversation with David Brown, otherwise known as DB Grady. He is the author of Deep State. Outside of that, he does stuff for The Atlantic. He's a regular contributor to The Week and Mental Floss. He is a former U.S. Army paratrooper and a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. It's really good conversation, something that everyone should enjoy. Again, this is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. I'm your host, Taylor, and we will be right back after this.
This is the Pint-Sized Pundit, and I am here to tell you that anything Taylor says on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge is his opinion and his opinion only. He does not speak for his employer, his employer's employer, or anyone else. He especially doesn't speak for Liz unless she says so.
We want to welcome Michael Moore to Occupy Wall Street. I'm so impressed by what I'm seeing here.
How much of people's income do you, Michael Moore, want the government to confiscate?
Probably twice what we're paying right now.
It's not envy, it's war.
Where's the rage? Where's the uprising?
Storm the doors of the New York Stock Exchange.
It is a class war.
If the wealthy paid their fair share. For a documentary filmmaker, I do really well. I'm very blessed.
And the rich thought poverty was bad.
I do well.
They get rid of it.
What pure? There's nothing pure about capitalism.
And they know what's coming on Wall Street.
We're seeing the end of capitalism. And I say good riddance.
He is one of my favorite capitalists. Yeah, I want to give him a hug.
Hi, this is Jonah Goldberg from National Review, and you're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Back here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. Very happy to have the author, or the co-author, of Inside the Government Secrecy Industry, Deep State. That would be David Brown, otherwise known as D.B. Grady. David, how are you doing?
Doing very well.
So I do want to ask this before we get into the book. You are a former U.S. Army paratrooper and a veteran of the war in Afghanistan?
That is correct.
So how did you make the switch from that to journalism?
Well, obviously writing was one of those things where that's kind of a job somebody else does. It's like saying you want to be an astronaut to me, or I want to be an actor. It's like, what? Yeah, that's something that other people do, that you read their work or see their work. So before I left for Afghanistan, I'd gotten interested in writing, and slowly but surely I did my due diligence on writing, how to read, or reading books on the subject and things like that. And 'cause my undergraduate degree is in computer science, so it's not like I'm bringing a whole depth of experience there on that front. So I went to Afghanistan. I was there 2006, 2007, and I came back. While I was over there, I did a lot of writing too, to some extent, just journaling what was going on over there. But when I came back, I befriended a few people, and the Atlantic, the political section for the Atlantic, the editor there was like, hey, do you want to write a couple pieces about what's going on there now? You might have an interesting perspective. So I started doing that, and a career kind of built from there.
And then how did y'all come up with the idea for doing this Deep State book? Because this was something that you and Mark Ambinder were working separately on, right?
Well, Mark was actually my editor at The Atlantic at the time, and he and I struck up a very good friendship. He's a very good friend of mine, and I think it was actually at his wedding where we were chatting, and he said, hey, do you want to write a book? And I was like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And we both have a mutual interest in the subject, not only military operations like Joint Special Operations Command and things like that, but also sort of the inner workings of how does the intelligence community work. We're both fans of Tom Clancy novels and things like that, and so it's one thing to say, well, the CIA went in and did this, but the follow-up question that not a lot of people really ask is, well, how did they do that? How did they get this intelligence? Where does an order come from? Does it start at the White House and work its way down, or do these things begin in the bureaucracy? So we began an exploration. We had a good, solid foundation in the subject, obviously, and we were able to build from there. We interviewed for Deep State. We interviewed well over 100 administration officials and members and heads of the intelligence community. So we had a really broad base of information when we went into it, and we learned a lot. Hopefully the readers will too.
One of the things that just in looking at this book, and I will be honest, I haven't completely read it yet. I've been buried in Elmore Leonard's Westerns, so hopefully you'll forgive me for that. I can only read one book at a time, and working on a split shift makes that even more hard. So, but what was the purpose of this book? Was it just to let people know why the government keeps things secret?
To a certain extent, we believe that the people of the United States tend to have an impoverished understanding of how the secrecy apparatus, we call it, how it works. And look, you're paying for it. You may as well know if it's working efficiently or not. You may as well know how it works and to what extent reforms are needed. And so that was kind of one of the driving factors in our research and in our writing.
Was there anything you were surprised to find in doing this research?
Last year, The Guardian obviously had made some pretty big news with the Edward Snowden document release. Two things surprised me of that. One, a great many of the scoops that Guardian had, we had already reported months before. So a lot of the NSA stuff was quite surprising to us, especially how the various systems inside the agency worked, how they interacted with various members of or various member agencies of the intelligence community. That was surprising, but also to the extent that there seems to be a general consensus within government that the secrecy system is broken. And this was before Snowden, obviously, but Bradley Manning was kind of the big thing, and WikiLeaks was kind of the big thing at the time. And it was surprising to me, the more people you talk to and the more information you gathered, the more you realize, the Bradley Manning, that was something. It's amazing that doesn't happen every single day. And one of the things that we began to see, and one of the things we argued in the conclusion of the book is, look, this is going to happen a lot more frequently, and it's going to be catastrophic. And then months later, Snowden leaked his documents, and I think we now have some understanding that he basically cleaned house at the NSA. So, I mean, that was as catastrophic to the NSA as any action could have been.
What is the solution then when it comes to government secrets and when it comes to trying to either protect them or having them leaked?
Well, look, here's the problem. Well over 1 million people have some form of security clearance in the United States. And it's not just concentrated in Washington, D.C. It's spread throughout the country. Chances are if you walk into a McDonald's, 2 people there are going to have top secret, or compartmented secret ratings. And the more people you have with access to classified material, the more likely it is that one of these people is going to talk. One of these people is going to put a thumb drive in their computer, download data, and leak it to WikiLeaks or leak it to The Guardian or whatever newspaper. So one thing that we argue in Deep State is to fix the secrecy problem in the United States, you need to get rid of a great number of secrets. The more secrets you have, the more secret keepers you need. The more secret keepers you have, the more likely it is to get a leak. So there are some things, for example, if an ambassador in Chad reads the New York Times and say asks for a clipping just for his filing cabinet, well, that gets marked as secret. So suddenly this thing that everybody knows is true because it's on the front page of the New York Times is technically given a secret stamp. In other words, if this article that's in the New York Times is leaked, somebody could go to jail. So the more secrets you have like that, or ridiculous or frivolous secrets you have like that, the more people you're going to have with access. So the goal should be to reform the system so that there are just logarithmically reduce the number of secrets out there, and in turn that will reduce the number of secret keepers you need, which will in turn reduce the number of leaks. And it's very basically the argument sustains itself when you just look at Manning and you look at Snowden and you realize neither of these men or women needed access to any of the material that they had. And that's the shocking part. It was just out there. They had the clearance. They had access to the computers, and they got it.
Is a part of the problem also the fact that not just so many secrets, but there are some stuff that is worth leaking, and it's trying to figure out what?
Right. Since the dawn of time, I mean, I'll put it to you like this: longer than the United States has been around, the notes from the Constitutional Convention were secret, and they were leaked over the course of the meeting of this. I mean, according to legend, Ben Franklin used to leak secrets at the local bar. So the United States has long had a history of having secrets, wink, wink, but we're going to let a certain number of things out. And that's always been kind of a pressure release valve. So the worse things get inside of government, the more likely it is somebody's going to leak to the press in order to alleviate some of the stress in the system. And it's always been unofficially accepted. And to a certain extent, it's worked. What we are seeing now, the Obama administration, more than any administration in American history, has one, gone after whistleblowers and leakers with
a lot,
Inquisition-like intensity. And not only that, though, they have politicized the leaks that go out. In other words, if a leak gets out, look, when all of the information leaked about the details of the bin Laden raid, that was fine. Nobody went to jail for that. But the minute leaks began to come out that weren't necessarily beneficial to the Obama administration, well, those we need to plug quick. We need to go after those guys. So if you politicize leaks like that, if you politicize this informal mechanism that's in place, then obviously some reform is needed.
Kirsten Powers once made the famous statement, or infamous statement, about the Obama administration is the only time we ever learn anything about them is when something leaks.
That's right.
And,
I would agree with that completely.
And I understand that people want to keep secrets, and I understand that there's some stuff that is worth keeping secret, but at the same time, there are ways to go about it that aren't horrifically political, right?
You mean in terms of how to leak? Well,
no, I mean like keeping secrets. I mean,
so in terms of releasing information that's already classified, right? Well, if you look in the last 30 years, President Clinton doesn't really get enough credit because he really instituted major reforms in the amount of material that we had classified, and tremendous tens, if not hundreds of thousands of documents and regulations and so on were declassified by the Clinton administration. And those reforms largely lasted until 9/11, at which time, understandably, certain things were tightened up just because we didn't know the nature of the enemy and so on and so forth. One of the things that we saw in the aftermath of 9/11 was the attempt to reclassify things that were already in the public domain, which is insane. I mean, that's madness. You can't. Once it's out there forever. So there are ways to do it. There are ways to reform the system. The Obama administration could do it tomorrow. The president of the United States has ultimate classification authority. So he's the guy. Is this guy the one who's going to do it? I would say there's a 0% chance of that happening. But it can be done. It's just a matter of signing an executive order.
One of the most telling statements, I thought, in this book is on page 39, where you say, or where it's written, many officials leak with an eye toward history. When things go right, no one thinks of the intelligence community. When things go wrong, recriminations whisk by as though fired from machine guns, and good men and women who often did the right things and spotted the right signs and alerted the right people are drowned out of the conversation. And so You were saying that those were the ones who basically end up doing the leaks.
Very often, and there are two ways to look at that. One, look, I'm going to use the bin Laden raid as an example because that was a time when leaks came so fast that reporters couldn't put them in. We couldn't write the articles fast enough as how fast things were leaking. If you look at an agency like the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, there's a good 75% chance that most people listening to this broadcast will have no idea what the NGA is. National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, that sounds like something from a Philip K. Dick novel, sounds like something from the future. But no, these guys were instrumental in finding bin Laden and identifying bin Laden and mapping his compound. And so when the SEALs went in to kill the guy, they knew exactly where he was. They knew exactly the layout of the land, and the capabilities of these guys was remarkable. I mean, they were able to monitor to the extent that they knew that the tall man walking around was bin Laden. They were able to identify men versus women in the compound. So it just a tremendous amount of information, a tremendous asset to the United States and to the intelligence community. But up until that point, they basically got zero press. Now, to a certain extent, if you're an intelligence agency, that's normal. Yeah, I mean, by virtue of the job, you don't get to just publicize anything. On the other hand, in Washington, everybody knows when you have a success, you need to kind of beat your own drum because you want to get more money, and that's how you protect yourself in the bureaucracy. So you had leaks, say, from the NGA on how they did what they did, and that has solidified their role in the intelligence community today and raised their profile tremendously. So when you look at things like that, when you look at really historical moments, whether it's going to war or whether it's daring commando raids. It's never just a 12-man special forces team who does it, and that's the end of the argument. And there's usually hundreds of people involved, and those people who are part of these major historic events don't get their credit. So it's nice, and it doesn't harm the security of the United States in the least to give these men and women their due, because they've earned it, certainly.
There are 17, at least according to Wikipedia, 17 separate agencies that are part of the U.S. intelligence
yes,
agency.
The intelligence community. Right.
Is that too many?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. The way it works, everyone has a different jurisdiction. So, for example, the Department of the Treasury has something like the Bureau of I don't know, I can't recall its exact name, the Bureau of Analysis or something like that. And they focus on things that you would expect the Department of Treasury to focus on. In other words, financial crimes and things of that nature. The FBI is obviously concerned with the internal security of the United States, whereas the CIA is looking outward. And we used to think that the NSA was looking outward, and obviously we learned
they're not
necessarily true. Right. The whole reason that the Director of National Intelligence Office was established was to make sure that we didn't see any overlap. In other words, we didn't want the FBI working on something and the CIA working on the exact same thing, doubling the effort, not talking to each other, and material that each different agency had could have worked together to give better intelligence. So the Director of National Intelligence is there specifically to make sure that we don't have overlap and to keep kind of the chain of information flowing. And that's very important. So I wouldn't say that there are too many intelligence agencies. I would certainly say that there's an awful lot of mission creep with the agencies that are out there. So, for example, I don't feel comfortable with the CIA being in the killing business with drone warfare, for example.
Right.
Contrary to what most people believe, the CIA is not an assassin ring. They don't send people out there to kill people. That's just never really been in the CIA's charter. And
don't tell Robert Ludlum.
Right. Well, once once 9/11 came, and once we started seeing drone activities, and obviously the paramilitarization of the CIA, suddenly that became not only normal. I mean, it became something that you brag about, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So, from that point of view, are we worried about intelligence, or are we worried about just building a commando establishment?
Yeah.
I would say I'd rather have intelligence.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm concerned is, again, just kind of seeing here, the U.S. Department of Energy has the Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, which gives information to the Secretary of Energy and senior senior federal policymakers. It apparently looks at national laboratories. It's actually nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation, energy, radio. Okay, why? I just don't. I'm being honest.
Sure.
I understand.
No. I understand. I understand completely, and it's a valid question to ask. Why would the DOE have their own intelligence agency? But the answer is because that's where the experts in nuclear proliferation and internal nuclear activities are. I mean, you could very easily, I suppose, open up an office at the FBI that just handles that. And the FBI does have weapons of mass destruction teams. However, that's when you start getting into thorny areas in terms of global jurisdiction. And so you're able to, in other words, instead of giving the FBI, for example, a massive new mandate to go after something enormous, and therefore increase the footprint of the FBI, and therefore increase its influence, and perhaps if it ever, say, turned to the dark side, quote unquote, becomes more difficult to rein in, you've got this one smaller agency at the Department of Energy that's able to do that one specific job and nothing else. So the DOE guys are never going to go after, say, counterfeiters. And that's good. That keeps them focused on this one job. And I would think that the security of the nuclear arsenal of the United States is very important.
That sounds almost too much of, I don't know, almost too much bureaucracy almost to keep stuff from happening. with all these different agencies.
I'm not sure I follow your argument there in terms of.
Well, no, you're saying you got all these different agencies,
right?
And okay, I understand the argument regarding Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence in case, say, a task force at the FBI goes rogue, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. And so they have these guys who can now look at it completely. They're not focused on anything else. For me, it almost seems like there's too much bureaucracy within all of these intelligence groups and honestly just zero trust.
Well, trust is a huge issue. I mean, that's something that's been absolutely drained away in the wake of the National Security Agency revelations, and rightfully so. I mean, this is something that they're going to have to earn again. But this isn't the first time. I mean, in the 70s, we saw the same thing with the revelations of the CIA and some of their activities, the family jewels. They were described that came to light. So this isn't the first time that the intelligence community has lost the faith of the American people, and it won't be the last. But it's an ongoing process. Now, in terms of bureaucracy, you can look at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and say, well, this is a whole new level of bureaucracy, and maybe it's too much. And I wouldn't necessarily argue with you on that point. Maybe it is too much. Maybe these guys are getting far too much funding. On the other hand, it was a solution implemented to a very real problem that resulted. I won't say resulted in 9/11, but certainly prevented us from stopping it.
And it's too bad they just couldn't get along.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what the Director of National Intelligence, that's what his job is there. They don't have to get along now. They've got this intermediary who's going to make sure that the various intelligence is passed back and forth. Is it efficient? Is it effective? That's one of the things that we explore with the book because, quite frankly, we don't know. It's not like you can open up the newspaper and see what's going on at the ODNI. I mean, we don't know what's going on at the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, for example. Who knows? Those are the kinds of things that need to be explored specifically because, look, you are correct. If there are agencies or departments out there or bureaus out there that are just wasting money, and look, historically, the intelligence community is very good at wasting money. If that's the case, we need to know about it so that we can shut that money off and we can reform that area. And that's one of the places where this kind of veil of secrecy absolutely needs to be lifted. It's going to be a slow process, and I don't feel confident that we're going to see it at least until 2016, but it is something that must happen and I think will happen.
What would you recommend as some of the solutions for this?
Well, as I'd mentioned earlier, reduce the number of secrets. You could reduce the number of secrets logarithmically, I think I said, and that would be absolutely get rid of the frivolous secrets and just keep the necessary secrets. In other words, the security of the President of the United States is paramount. That's a secret that absolutely must be guarded jealously. The security of the nuclear arsenal is something. We don't want the launch codes just leaking onto the Internet. That's something that can be guarded jealously. But some newspaper article that an ambassador in a third world country read, there's no reason to have that as a secret. And we want to make sure that guy or his staff doesn't have security clearances because, look, when they move to a different place, there's a good chance that they're going to be able to put that clearance to good use, and that good use might not be to the benefit of the United States of America, as we saw with Edward Snowden. And look, I'm of mixed feelings with Snowden, don't get me wrong, but I would argue that there's no reason that he should have ever had access to any of that material, but he did. Likewise, Manning. So if you reduce the number of secrets, that's going to fix 90% of the problems right there. You can guard, say, 1,000 secrets. You can't guard 10 million secrets.
No, I don't tend to. I do not disagree with you there. One of the things that I was amused by was how this interview got set up. It had everything to do with somebody retweeting a comment about Punisher that I made, that Nathan Edmondson, the author of Punisher, retweeted.
He's a great guy. He's a really great guy.
I actually hung out with him last Saturday.
How cool!
He was in town doing a signing, and so I got to go, and I owe several people comic books, and they're on their way. They're on their way. Don't worry.
His career's really taken off.
Yeah.
I first met him when he was writing The Activity, and he contacted me and said, "Hey, can you see if can you take a look at our comics and see if there's accuracy or if there are mistakes in there, things that we can improve upon." So we kind of struck up a friendship from there. But really great guy.
Have you ever read any other comics, or just Nathan's?
Oh no, I'm a longtime comic book fan. I got into it, I think, just before high school. Was around the time when Superman died the first time. Bane broke Batman. So that was my DC area, and I was like a huge Transformers, like the original Transformers run from Marvel Comics. I was a huge fan of it. So I followed those for a while, and then of course when I really got back into it after the Marvel Civil War a few years ago.
What did you think of that?
Look,
of that storyline? I
wasn't a super I wasn't super enthusiastic about it, but I will say this: when a sniper kills Captain America, I thought, well, they finally did something serious. Like, okay, they put a punctuation mark on it, and that was it. And it was an asinine issue. Don't get me wrong. With that final interview he did, the America that we've become versus the America that he stood for, I much prefer his America to ours. But so they put a sniper bullet in his head, and I thought, well, this is. At least it's something that's going to resonate and something we're going to feel. And there's no way you can undo that. And then sure enough, they find a way to undo it. So that's disappointed me a little bit. I felt better before they went back and played around with it. So
I loved the Ed Brubaker run on Captain America. I thought he did a great job. Chuck Dixon, who broke the Bat's back, is actually a good friend of the show too. So
really,
yes,
that's very cool. That was one of those comics that absolutely was enthralling to me. And they were doing great artwork in those days. It was just fine storylines. It was a wonderful time.
His the stuff that he's doing, or the stuff that he did, was actually what got me into comics. His Robin series, which I started reading when I was 13, 14 years old, obviously appealed to the 13, 14-year-old in me, and was just a great series that I was a big fan of. And Chuck is tentatively scheduled to be here in a few weeks, so that will be on the show in a few weeks to discuss some projects he's got going on, which is always a nice thing. So, David Brown, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate the talk when it comes to your new book, Deep State: Inside the Government Secrecy Industry, written by you under the pseudonym D.B. Grady, along with Mark. Is it Ambinder or Ambinder? Ambinder, along with Mark Ambinder. So, where can we find you online?
You can go to dbgrady.com, and that has links to all the various places. And I'm on Twitter, of course, at dbgrady. So by all means, follow me, and we can be best friends forever.
All right, David, thank you so much. And
thank you for having me.
We will be right back here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge on Vigilant Liberty Radio right after this.
This is Chuck Dixon, the co-creator of Bane, and you're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Hi, I'm Dustin Hoyt with America Our Way, and you can hear me right here on Vigilant Liberty Radio at 10/9 Central on Thursday nights. We bring you the best in political commentary from the right-wing, conservative, libertarian perspectives coming together and bringing the best content on the internet. Be sure to tune in every week for your favorite shows. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
The the fact that Dustin Hoyt put together that promo featuring When the Levee Breaks by Led Zeppelin makes me like him even more than I already did. And not just the fact that he's a Texan, but that he's in favor of that. This is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. About 10 minutes left in the show. Want to thank David Brown again for being on earlier, for discussing Deep State, his book. It's worth reading, worth checking out. It's pretty eye-opening. To answer Pope Sparkle's Beautiful Eye Wings in the chat room, National Security, comic books, and Indiana Jones. Name 3 things that Sparkle knows very little about. Well, Beautiful Eye, that's why you come here. Because, see, you come here and you can learn more about all of that. About comic books, national security, and occasionally Indiana Jones, although I still haven't seen the film that came out in 2008 because it didn't look good and it had Shia LaBeouf in it. So I tried to skip his films, except for the Transformer ones. Those were actually pretty good. I do want, or at least the 2 that I saw were good. Something from earlier this week which caught my eye, to switch completely from topics from pop culture to conservative media, is a discussion that the FEC chair had with the Washington Examiner in discussing this push within government to talk about to kind of, in the media's exemption from federal election laws governing political organizations, what FEC Commissioner or Commission Chairman Lee E. Goodman said, "I think there are impulses in the government every day to second-guess and to look into the editorial decisions of conservative publishers. The right has begun to break into the left's media monopoly, particularly through new media outlets like the internet, and I sense that some on the left are starting to rethink the breadth of the media exemption and internet communications." What Goodman really thought had to do with Drudge Report, and that he was going to, he sees the future going to the democratization of the media largely through the internet. They can compete with the big boys now, and I have seen storm clouds that the second you start to regulate them, there is at least the possibility, or indeed proclivity, for selective enforcement, so we need to keep the media free and the internet free. Agree 100% on keeping the internet and the radio, the internet free. It is something that it's really important. They have to keep the internet free, and they have to keep the media free, because the problem that you run into there is that the moment you start regulating stuff, the more it just gets, for lack of a better term, darker and darker. And people get more afraid to say what they want to say. And the fact that there are people in government thinking about this, regardless whether it's on the left or on the right, it doesn't matter. Jason Pye from United Liberty is a big fan of saying statism is the enemy. And he's right, statism is the enemy. And that right there, the discussion about the FEC chair saying that there wants to be regulation like PACs have regulation, that's statism. The U.S. government telling the city of Dallas, the Department of Justice telling the city of Dallas that, hey, you have to give these 2 gates to Virgin America at Dallas Love Field. That's statism. Now, who decides? Well, when you have that become an issue, I'm sorry, no government should be involved in telling businesses, in telling corporations, and telling people what they should do unless they are breaking the freedom of others or breaking the Constitution. Not the law, the Constitution, because let's be honest, there are laws out there which are unconstitutional. There's plenty of stuff out there that's unconstitutional. So let's stick with saying, hey, how about my freedom ends where your freedom begins? That's the way I look at it. Now, one other thing that's important to realize is that people can also just change the channel. If nobody likes what I'm saying because they disagree with it, turn on FTR radio or AltCon radio or, the 12 people who watch MSNBC or the people who like listening to NPR. Change the station. It's not that hard. But I think people get so afraid about not only being challenged, not just people, government too, get so afraid about being challenged, get so afraid about people doing something different that they go nuts over it. Maybe I'm wrong on this. If I am, you can tweet me. I'm at EYE Desert Blog. That's at EYE Desert Blog. You can also listen to me on Wednesdays and Thursday nights on FTR Radio with The Right War with Liz Harrison, otherwise known as the boss around here. Tomorrow night, we will have Next with Jonathan Sangster. I am at least scheduled to be the producer tomorrow night, so you can catch me tomorrow night too if you want to. Also, tomorrow afternoon, you can catch Truth Serum with Gerald Harrison. That is at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. Monday is Their Finest Hour with Alan Bordius. Tuesday is the Roundtable of Extreme Liberty. Wednesday is the Modern Comment Show here, followed by The Right War. Thursday, obviously, is America Our Way with Dustin Hoyt, which is a show which you should be listening to, followed by The Right War. Friday, the Conservative Feminist Show, which starts at 11 p.m. Eastern and goes until question mark. That's the best way to put it. It goes until question mark. And then you're back here on Saturday for Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. So thank you folks very much for listening to tonight. Again, thanks to David Brown for being on. Not sure what's going to happen next week, outside of the fact that there is going to be a show. The week after that, tentatively scheduled, is Chuck Dixon. We may get into a conversation about certain comic book characters that I am a big fan of, and he says have never been written right because, or isn't always written right because certain comic book companies don't understand them. So that should be fun. Plus, we'll talk about his latest book that is out too. Thanks again, folks. Again, this is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge signing off for the evening. We'll talk with you next week. Good night, all.
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of panelists and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media, the host, or anyone else.